as promised. All right, so on the webinar tonight, we're going to be talking about, as you guys know, how to have that smooth and efficient birth, right? How to labor naturally without any unnecessary fear, pain, or interventions. And if you want to have any of the kinds of births that we were just talking about, a natural birth in hospital, a home birth, a birth center birth, or a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean, for any of those kinds of births, you really do need to know how to have a smooth and efficient birth. You really do need to have these tools and techniques under your belt, or else your birth plan gets threatened, right? It can go a lot more sideways if you don't know how to labor naturally without unnecessary fear, pain, or intervention. And a big key to doing that is feeling really empowered. And empowerment is being given the confidence and the education to help you to feel calm and strong and in control in your labor, instead of what so many women end up experiencing, which is feeling scared and stressed and overwhelmed, sometimes even helpless and vulnerable in their births. And that is like the last thing I want you to feel. So that's why I want you to leave here tonight at the end of this webinar feeling super empowered. And the woman who empowers me in my births, in my business, just kind of in life in general, she's like a total rock star, is Ina May Gaskin. If you don't know who she is, you'll definitely want to jot her name down, look her up after this webinar, because she's a very, very wise woman. She's known as the mother of modern midwifery. And this is actually the second time I had met her. This is at her house in Tennessee a year ago, just a couple of weeks ago. So I like to open this webinar with a quote by Ina May, because I think that it frames the rest of the webinar so very nicely, because she says, wherever and however you give birth, your experience will impact your emotions, your mind, your body, and your spirit for the rest of your life. And, you know, the reason I like to kind of highlight this quote is because if this is your first baby, right, you may not fully 100% grasp just how deeply this experience is going to impact you. And if it's not your first baby, you can like totally vouch for the fact that it does have a massive impact on you. I always say it's like a tattoo on your soul. Your birth experience is very, very important to you. And that's why I just like to lay that on the table kind of before we even get started, just to highlight that your birth is very, very, very important. And so how are you feeling? Are you feeling a little bit nervous perhaps about your upcoming birth? And if you are, that is totally fine. I'm here to say that that's you know, very normal, very common. But even if you're not feeling nervous, you still signed up for this webinar, right? You still signed up and showed up live, right? So that tells me that somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a little seed of doubt or fear or lack of confidence happening in the back of your mind. And again, totally normal, totally common, and not your fault. The reason that women feel that way, that doubt or fear or lack of confidence, is for three reasons, in my opinion. First one being societal bias, which I'm going to talk about in 1 second. The second is the medical model, which I'm going to outline for you. And then the third is just your own lack of clarity or understanding about how to actually cope with the pain of contractions. And those three things in combination have made you feel that kind of shaky feeling when you think about giving birth naturally. And the good news is you don't need to feel that way, right? All you need is to have the right system and have the right mindset in order to take control of your birth experience and have a really empowered, beautiful birth. And the reason that I say the societal bias is the number one reason that you're feeling this way is because, you know, natural birth on the whole in society is viewed as basically unnecessary, right? People will say all kinds of things to women who are trying to give birth naturally. And that's basically because, you know, TV, movies, popular media does not shine a flattering light at all on labor and birth. It's always viewed as this kind of traumatic, scary, panicked kind of an event. And as well, other women's negative birth experiences are always told way more often in way more detail than the positive ones are. And because of that, really, like throughout your whole entire life, not just since you've been pregnant, but your whole life, really, these outside influences have kind of been seeping in and have settled somewhere right in the back of your mind, and have kind of impacted your current beliefs. And that's fine. But tonight on the webinar, we're going to change those beliefs because they are not serving you. If you feel that doubt or fear or lack of confidence, we are going to change it. Because raise your hand or type yes in the chat, you guys, if you've heard someone say to you something along the lines of don't be a hero when you say that you want to give birth naturally. I can see some hands being raised here. Let me check the chat. Yes, says Destiny. Yes, says Cabby. Half sis says yes. Ashley says thumbs up. Yes. Look at all the hands raising. So this is a very, very common experience, right? That women get this kind of, I don't know, this, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, not lip, but like attitude, essentially, about trying to give birth naturally. People give them kind of snarky remarks. You know, you don't get a medal at the end of the day. You still get the same baby at the end of your birth, no matter how you do it. Why do you want to suffer? Why would you give birth naturally when there are drugs, right? So this is a very common thing that women hear. And we have to completely kind of push that out of our minds and instead replace it with some more empowering thoughts, such as birth is a normal, natural, physiological process, and I have nothing to fear. So let's break those down one by one, okay? Birth is a normal, natural, physiological process. Yes, it is. This is part of your reproductive process. Your body was able to conceive this baby. Your body was able to grow and develop and create this baby to like levels of specificity and perfection that we can't even like wrap our brains around, okay? So like that in and of itself is so incredibly exciting and impressive. And the birth process is just the next step of that process, right? And think evolutionarily, right? Maybe not these days because so many people are born by C-section, but evolutionarily, every single person on this planet was born through the birth process. Every single animal on this planet was born through the birth process. So this is a very normal, natural, physiological process. Your body totally knows what to do, okay? So rest assured about that. And the second thing is that you have nothing to fear. And for, yes, you have nothing to fear because this is a normal, natural, physiological process that your body knows how to do, but also because fear itself is actually a massive obstacle that stands in the way of you having a smooth and efficient birth. So I'm going to talk about fear quite a bit more as we move through the webinar. But before we do, I want to take a little step back here in case anyone out there doesn't know who I am. I want to take a second and introduce myself. So again, my name is Corinne Brown. I am a labor doula with a background in naturopathic medicine. I'm actually a mom of 3. That little onesie has been filled. My third little boy is on the outside now. I just had him on May 13th. And I'm also the CEO and president of my own online business called Brown Roots Baby. And so I want to give you guys a little bit of the backstory. I want to tell you how I ended up here tonight on this webinar with you guys teaching about natural labor preparation. So back in 2010, I graduated as a naturopathic doctor after 9 years of post-secondary education. So I only say that just so that you can understand how tired and, you know, probably burnt out a little bit I was already. Nonetheless, graduated, opened my own clinic. I was working inside a midwifery office on my own business, which was a prenatal naturopathic clinic. So that's a pretty good pairing, right? So I was seeing almost exclusively prenatal and postpartum women and their babies, so pediatric patients as well. And this was a dream come true for me. This was like a lifelong dream that I've always wanted to work with this kind of a population. This is a passion of mine. And so this was a very rich learning experience for me working in this clinic because I was seeing my own patients in clinic, right? And I was helping them to prepare for their birth and induce their labors. I was also attending many of those births because all my patients wanted me to come to their births. So I was attending those births at night. And then I was also working amongst all of these really amazing midwives and learning so much from them. And so, yes, very rich learning experience for me during those times, but also very, very demanding, as you can imagine, right? Running my own business, attending births at night, and I also had a baby of my own at home at the time. And so not too much time left over for little old me. And very quickly, my body was like, nope, you cannot keep doing this. Pulled the e-brake on me, and I got really sick. I basically burnt out pretty hard. In this picture here, I weighed less than 90 pounds. I was losing weight every single day. Finally was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And that was a wake-up call for me as a naturopathic doctor to get a diagnosis like that. I knew something was severely out of whack. And so I kind of took a step back, looked at my life and was like, oh yeah, I have a business and a baby and no time left over for myself. And so with a very heavy heart, I did decide to actually close my physical practice and leave the midwifery office and instead focus on myself. I did a huge detox, started doing yoga, just really, really focusing on my own self-care. And really quickly, like within a few months, I was back up to my healthy weight. I was off the medications. I was completely symptom-free and have been ever since. So that goes to show how much this life-work balance thing really affected me. And so 3 months later, after I got this diagnosis, I was feeling so healthy and I got the itch to get back to work because I knew I had so much information to help pregnant women to give birth naturally. And I really wanted to share that. But this time I decided to do it in a more sustainable way. So now I work exclusively online. And the beautiful thing about this, aside from the fact that it's much more sustainable for me to, take care of myself and raise my young family, but on top of that, it's better for you guys because before, if you weren't in Burlington, Ontario, Canada, which many of you are not, then we didn't have access to each other, right? When I had my clinic. But now, no matter where you are in the world, if you have Wi-Fi and a link to this webinar, then I can help you learn how to give birth naturally. So that is like so mind-blowingly amazing for me. So nowadays I do live speaking gigs like I am here in this picture. I attend a few births per year, many, many less than I was back in the day, just because I have my own children and it's a lot trickier. I also have a video blog called Brown Roots Baby Talk, and I host this webinar on a regular basis. And this webinar has now had over 10,000 women go through it, learn from me how to give birth naturally, which is a crazy number. 10,000 women have learned these tools and tips and tricks from me. And so now it's probably pretty clear, pretty obvious, you can probably hear me smiling, that I love my job now, right? I am really making a difference. I am changing lives. I'm impacting births, and I'm totally chasing my passion. And this passion is something that's been with me really as long as I can remember. Like when I was really young, like 3 and 4 years old, in these pictures here, I'm doing what I was always doing. I was playing house or being mom. And in the top picture there, I'm being mom to a cold milk baby, I called it. Like I would carry around a bag of milk as my baby. And I don't think it's overly unique that a little girl would be maternal, because I think little girls are very maternal. But what was unique about me at this very young age is that I also knew about the birth process. I also knew my mom's birth stories, my aunt's birth stories, and my grandmother's birth stories at like 4 years old. And maybe because I was so young and so little, but none of them spoke about labor and birth in a scary, traumatic way to me. They actually very much described all their births pretty much the same way, and that they were short, intense, and natural. And so I came to know these women as my 4-hour power birthers. All the women on my mom's side of the family had these like total birth goddess genes. And I assumed that I was going to get those same genes since I was, part of that lineage, but unfortunately, I did not. My births have been challenging and imperfect, but I want to share them with you because the beautiful thing about challenging imperfect births, for me especially, is that I learned so much from them and then could extrapolate from what I learned and teach it to you guys. So every birth that I go through, I learn something more. And so that's the silver lining there. So I'm going to share with you Rowan's birth story, which was my first one. And I did send out an email about it. But if you didn't get a chance to read it, I'm just going to really quickly go through it here. So this is me and my husband, Kyle. In 2011, we were pregnant with our first baby. Super excited, right? I was a naturopath and a labor doula, so I knew I wanted to have a natural birth without intervention. So we planned a natural home birth. So I had my doula lined up, I had my midwife hired, I had a home birth planned, and I had these 4-hour power birther genes on my side, right? So maybe a little bit cocky, but I did not do any labor preparation for myself. So even though I was helping other women in clinic prepare for their births, induce their labors, I wasn't doing any of that for myself. And my logic was that I didn't want my birth to be any faster than 4 hours. I didn't want it to be like totally traumatic. I wanted it to just kind of be what it was going to be. So at 39 weeks on the dot, basically, I went into labor. I just started having contractions while I was making the bed one night, and they progressively got, stronger and stronger and a little bit closer together. And so I was like, okay, I'm in labor. So for the next 12 hours, I labored at home in the dark with my husband in our bedroom. And it was the most intimate, most beautiful, most relaxing, very, very wonderful birth experience, labor experience. But 12 hours in, I'm like, okay, this is not going to be a 4-hour power birth. Clearly, I should probably try to get some rest. And so as soon as my head hit the pillow, my water broke. And there was actually meconium in the fluid. And meconium is basically a distress signal from the baby saying something isn't right, baby's not happy in there, something's, wrong. And usually you would see that with, maybe an overdue baby, but I was a week early and we weren't sure what was going on. So we called the midwife. She came and checked me. She said I was 5 centimeters dilated, which I was pretty happy about. But she looked at me and said, but Corinne, he is not head down. And I cannot tell what position he is in and from what I'm feeling. And so from now on, you are not allowed to stand up. And the reason for that is because, my cervix was dilated enough that if I stood up, it risked the umbilical cord slipping out through the cervix because the baby's head was not there blocking the opening of the cervix. So basically, she called 911. She called the ambulance. I was removed from my house on a stretcher, and there goes my home birth, right? So I was pretty upset, pretty shaken up. My husband and I were both in tears. We got to the hospital, and they did an ultrasound and found out the baby was frank breech. So that means he was bummed down and his feet were up by his ears. And the OB that we were transferred to was this really awesome old dude he was actually about to retire. He had delivered thousands of babies, some of whom had been frank breech. And so he was like, you know what? This is the best position to deliver a breech baby vaginally. If you want to go ahead and do that, I will allow you to have a trial of labor. So I could have kissed this man on the mouth. I thought for sure I was going to be having just an automatic C-section. But getting the chance to labor was so very valuable to me. So I was like, yes, I jumped at the chance. Yes, absolutely. I want to labor. Thank you so much. And we labored at the hospital for another 12 hours together, but there was no more progress beyond that 5 centimeters of dilation. And I think that there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, fear, which we've kind of alluded to a little bit. We're going to talk about it some more, but I went from this dark, intimate, beautiful birth or labor experience to ambulance, to hospital, to machines and ultrasounds and, being hooked up to IV and like all the things that I didn't want when I was planning my home birth. And the second reason is that the baby wasn't properly positioned in the pelvis, right? And we're going to talk about baby positioning and how very critically important that is to the progress of your labor and the progress of your cervix. So basically, as you can probably assume by now, after 24 hours of natural labor, we did end up with a C-section. And so this picture was really hard for me to look at for a long time, because this was a complete 180 from what I had envisioned this moment to be, right? I had envisioned that he would be born onto my chest, skin to skin, right away. We would have all this bonding and it would be magical. But instead, I'm covered, he's covered, my arms are strapped down, I can't even touch him. There's no skin to skin. My husband went and did skin to skin with him for the first hour while I was in recovery. And so we missed out on a lot of that. And for my postpartum with this baby, I dealt with some really heavy emotions after this birth that I was not expecting, like grief. I did not expect to feel this, but I grieved my natural birth. And a lot of people didn't understand that. They were like, you still have a healthy baby. Like, what are you so sad about? But you guys might understand that, right? Because you also want to have a natural birth, and you understand that if you saw it slipping away from you like that, you would also feel that sense of loss. I felt a deep sense of frustration because I did not plan on having to heal from major abdominal surgery at all, let alone doing it with a newborn. And I don't have any family support around where I live. And so this was a very, very challenging recovery for me. I felt embarrassed because I was the naturopathic doctor, labor doula, working in the midwifery office, right? Helping people learn how to prepare for their births, and then helping women have these beautiful birth experiences. And then I couldn't pull it off myself. So I didn't want to tell my birth story. I basically just wanted to hide under a rock, because I regretted my birth outcome. And I think if there's one thing that I want to help you prevent experiencing, it's regretting the outcome of your birth and feeling like you didn't do enough beforehand to get ready to prepare yourself. So that's another reason that I created this webinar, is just to help you make sure that you don't regret how your birth turns out. But out of all these emotions, I would say the predominant one was anxiety, because anxiety is a common emotion in the postpartum period for sure. But I could clearly tell you that my anxiety came from my C-section, because I knew having a C-section this time increased the risk of having a C-section for every future birth that I had. And so as soon as the idea of never giving birth naturally and always having C-sections was enough to put me into a panic attack. Like, it was severe. So basically, I got home from the hospital after having my C-section, and I just started researching as much as I could. And I wasn't Googling around. I was pulling out all of my old naturopathic obstetrics textbooks and all of my notes from all of my classes and lectures, and reviewing research articles and consulting with peers and colleagues who were focusing in this area as well, and getting my hands on as much information. And I already knew a lot, right? I was already a naturopath. I was already a doula. I was already attending births. I was already, running a clinic focusing on this area, but I didn't feel like I knew enough to prevent myself from going through this whole thing again. So originally, all this additional research was selfish. It was for my own next birth, to prevent myself from having another C-section. But then I went back to work part-time about 6 weeks later after I had the baby, and was once again working with all my pregnant women who were preparing for their birth, and was like, oh yeah, I should probably spread the word. I should probably share the things that I've learned in all of this additional research with these women. I should probably actually start to implement and try these things out before my own next birth. So eventually that's what I did. They were like my guinea pigs. I eventually put every single pregnant woman who was coming through my office through this really nice kind of 4-step natural labor preparation system. And all the women who were going through this system, and all of their partners and the midwives, everyone was telling me stories of confidence and feeling so proud and feeling so strong, and that this woman felt like such a badass. And, the partners were lit up and empowered and excited by this birth. And the midwives were so happy because the births were so smooth and efficient, and their patients were so educated and knew what was going on. It was just like amazing for everyone. And so professionally, I was feeling on top of the world. I was feeling so successful, so happy. But personally, that is when I got sick, and that is when I had to close my practice. And so for 2 years, no pregnant patients went through my 4-step natural labor preparation system. Just kind of sat in the back of my brain and collected dust for a while. But then 2 years later, I got pregnant with my second baby, and I knew that I had to go through that system. That was the whole point of this whole thing. So I took that opportunity to kind of pull it out again, look it over, and actually translate it into an online program. So this is now my flagship online program called Love Your Labor. And it's based off those 4 steps that I used to do in clinic. So a little bit later on, I'm going to walk you through those 4 steps and introduce you to the Love Your Labor program. But basically, I just want you to know for now that the webinar tonight is basically module 1 of this program for free, the natural labor preparation module. So if you like what you hear in the webinar and you're feeling inspired and totally aligned and excited by everything, then a little bit later on, I can show you how to go on and work with me further if you're interested. Okay? So there I was, pregnant with my second baby now, planning a VBAC, so a vaginal birth after cesarean, creating the Love Your Labor program, and simultaneously following along with the Love Your Labor program because I, wanted to have this natural birth. And I'm 100% sure, without a doubt, that it's because of the Love Your Labor program that my husband and I were able to have an all-natural vaginal birth after cesarean with Harvey. And the reason I say I'm 100% sure without a doubt is because there was 3 separate times in this birth. This was another kind of imperfect, kind of rocky birth, because there was 3 separate times in this birth that a C-section was threatened. 3 separate times my midwife and I looked at each other and were like, damn it, here comes the repeat C-section. But each and every one of those times, my husband and I were able to go to the Love Your Labor handbook, which is so funny because it's in this picture right here. We would flip it open to the problem that we were having, and it would be like, step by step by step, here's how you resolve that issue. And it worked. Each and every time we were able to bust through the roadblock that we were coming up against and continue on to eventually achieve our VBAC, which at the time was the greatest accomplishment of our lives, or my life for sure. So although a 4-hour power birth would have probably been lovely for my second baby, a 14-hour birth with lots of problems and bumps in the road actually proved the Love Your Labor program to me personally. It was even better to have a bit of a difficult birth that needed some problems overcome, because that kind of proved the program, because I'd seen it work for so many other women, but to have something work like that for you personally is just totally game changing. So then 3 years later, after having Harvey, we got pregnant again with our third baby. And so this time it had been 3 years since I had created Love Your Labor. And so I was pregnant again. This time I was planning a home birth after cesarean. And I took this opportunity, pregnant with my third baby, going through the program yet again, to actually update the content. Because in those 3 years, I have learned so much. I have read, I've attended, conferences, and I've just gained more knowledge that was not present in the program in the first place. So I updated the program throughout this pregnancy and obviously followed along with it once again, and was able to have a very successful, guys, get this, 4-hour power birth. It was actually a 3-hour birth for Vance's birth. So it was a home birth after cesarean. And again, this was just on May 13th. So needless to say, I am a firm believer, huge advocate of this material and of this process. So just to kind of come full circle now and wrap things up here, I just want to come back and highlight and remind you, or tell you guys, I guess, that now I love that first birth, right? I no longer feel the regret and the grief and the embarrassment and frustration, all those things about that C-section, because now I can see that it was part of the master plan, right? That is what opened up my entire world to teaching this very important information to the women who are next up at bat, which is you guys. And I would be honored to be an example for you if what I've learned and what I have gone through can help you guys have the birth experience that you want to have. That's my goal. I want to give you every opportunity to do that. And so that's why I created this webinar. That is why we are going to actually dive in right here, right now. So let's talk about what is on the agenda tonight. We're going to talk about the 3 most common incorrect assumptions that most pregnant ladies are making. Whoops. We're going to talk about what natural labor preparation actually is and why you absolutely need it for your birth. We're going to talk about the birth goddess magic mindset that will help you labor so much easier in literally 1 second flat. We're going to talk about the 3 principles of training your mind to have a smooth and efficient birth. 3 principles of training your mind to cope well with contractions, no matter how hard they get. There we go. 3 principles of training your body to have a smooth and efficient birth. Then I'm going to walk you through the 4 steps to loving your labor. And then toward the end, I'll give you access to the labor room survival guide, the free ebook, as promised. Alrighty, so let's dive right in. Assumption number 1 is that you and your doctor have the same ideal birth plan. And unfortunately, gosh, it breaks my heart to burst this bubble, but that is not necessarily always the case. In fact, your birth plan might be very different from your doctor's birth plan. And the reason for that is basically that this is your doctor's job, right? So you can imagine doing the same job day in, day out for, many years in most cases. It loses a little bit of the magic. It loses a little bit of the mystique, and it becomes less about you and your beautiful, magical, wonderful birth experience that you only get a couple of opportunities to have in your life. And it becomes more about the way the doctor prefers to do their job, the way they prefer to conduct a birth. And most of the time, especially with OBs, the way they prefer to conduct a birth is not entirely natural. And in their defense, that's just not their training, right? They are just less experienced in how to medically encourage how to naturally encourage and allow and support a natural birth. And they're more experienced and trained in how to medically manage and conduct a birth. And so, of course, that's not true for every single OB on the planet, right? Lots of OBs do support and encourage natural births, but the tricky thing, the catch-22, is that almost every OB will be like, okay, yeah, no problem. You want to have a natural birth, I'll support you in that. But then you get to 37, 38, 39 weeks, and they change their tune. They start talking about interventions. They start talking about inductions. They start, planting seeds about you not being able to do it naturally, and talking about C-sections and epidurals. And, that leads to a lot of women feeling very disempowered, very vulnerable, and having this kind of power struggle that they don't want to be having around their birth. And I don't want that to happen to you. So no matter how your doctor feels about natural births, it's almost irrelevant, because the best thing you can do for yourself and for your birth is to go into your birth feeling super empowered. And the way to do that is with natural labor preparation. So what is natural labor preparation? How is it different from, typical labor preparation? Well, it's actually twofold, okay? So the first part is what we're doing here tonight on the webinar. This is where we train the body and mind to have that smooth and efficient birth. So if you think of your body as a machine, which it basically is, a very beautiful, intelligent, wise machine, then when you go into labor, we want you to be like a well-oiled birthing machine, right? We want everything to be aligned and firing on all cylinders. We want you to be super, super ready so that everything just goes off without a hitch, super smooth and efficient. The second part of natural labor preparation is where we actually go in and identify and overcome those big obstacles, those big roadblocks, those problems that women come up against when they're trying to have a natural birth, specifically in hospital. And there's many of these obstacles and roadblocks that we talk about in the Love Your Labor program, but two that I want to talk about on the webinar tonight, because they're probably two of the biggest, are fear, which again, I keep kind of touching on it a little bit, but we're going to talk about it in a sec here. But even bigger than fear is something that is a much bigger problem, because most women don't know it's a thing. They don't know to look out for it. And so it's a little bit of a birth booby trap in that way. And it's something I like to call the labor funnel. And this is why you need natural labor preparation for your birth, because the labor funnel is surprisingly difficult to avoid if you're not actively preventing yourself from going into it. So Ricki Lake created a series of birth documentaries. The first one she created was called The Business of Being Born. If you have not seen this documentary yet, you'll want to get your hands on it. You can get it at thebusinessofbeingborn.com. Some people say it's even available on Netflix, although I have yet to confirm that. It might be only American, it might be only Canadian, I'm not sure. But either way, this is a full-length documentary. She talks about this, she doesn't call it the labor funnel, but she talks about this trend or sequence of interventions that happens in hospital that is basically stealing women's birth experiences from them, their natural birth experiences. So I'm not going to go through like every detail of the movie here, but I do want to give you a really quick Reader's Digest version of this labor funnel so that you can understand what it is and you can hopefully prevent yourself from going into it. So Angie says it's definitely on American Netflix. So American friends, check it out. All right, so anything here in this purple triangle is a risk factor for going into the labor funnel, okay? So going more than 2 weeks overdue increases the risk of the labor funnel. Having a premature rupture of membranes or your waters spontaneously breaking before your body's actually ready to go into labor increases the risk of the labor funnel. Having a slow dilation or long early labor. Now those two things go hand in hand. Early labor is anything before 4 centimeters of dilation. So these are the women who will say, I was in labor for 24 hours and I was 2 centimeters dilated, okay? So they fall under that category of slow dilation and long early labor. That definitely increases the risk of the labor funnel, because you can imagine how disappointing and disheartening that is to get a 2 centimeter report after 24 hours of labor. A baby being in the improper position, like my baby was, increases the risk of the labor funnel, as well as, going into labor and running to the hospital as soon as possible increases the risk of going into the labor funnel as well. So most often, the first step into the labor funnel is Pitocin. And Pitocin is a drug that looks a lot like our own natural labor hormone, oxytocin. But because it's a drug, it's synthetic, it's more concentrated, more potent. And so the contractions that are brought on by Pitocin are significantly longer, stronger, harder than your own natural labor contractions would be. And there's no easing into it. When you get Pitocin, it's like you hit a brick wall of contractions and they're instantly incredibly difficult. There's no like kind of warming up. And so because of that, the vast majority of women do not labor naturally with Pitocin. They just ask for an epidural relatively quickly. Then a common side effect of getting an epidural is that the labor actually slows down. So the contractions were long, strong, close together, but now they're kind of weak and further apart. But that's not what the hospital wants, right? They want to conduct this birth. They want to get things moving. And so now they're good to give you more Pitocin because you have an epidural. You can't feel it. So this stage of the funnel can cause like a whole sequence of other funnels. More Pitocin can cause the uterus to fatigue. It can cause the cervix to swell. But one that I want to talk about here is that, the contractions are back to being really long, really strong, really difficult, really close together. You can't feel them, but the baby still is not getting that break in between contractions that it's used to, that nature has designed. And this is a very difficult labor for the baby, and that can cause the baby to go into distress. So if the baby's heart rate drops, now we have a medical emergency. Everyone's freaking out, panicked, running around. We have to get the baby out. So if you're fully dilated 10 centimeters, you're pushing when the baby's heart rate drops, then you're looking at an instrumental intervention. So that is vacuum forceps, episiotomy, something like that, to get baby born right away. Just get baby out of the birth canal as quickly as possible. If you're not fully dilated and pushing when the baby's heart rate drops, then you're looking at a C-section, potentially even an emergency C-section, to have baby born quickly, to make sure that everyone is, all good at the end of the day. And so, of course, not every single woman who gets Pitocin is going to get an emergency C-section, right? It's not quite that linear. It's not quite that highly correlated, but this sequence, this trend that happens in hospital is alarmingly common, much more common than it needs to be, than it should be, than I want it to be, for sure. So here are the statistics. About 20% of women are getting induced with Pitocin. That's just induced. I do not have a stat for how many women are getting augmented or boosted with Pitocin. 80% of women are getting an epidural, and that's not 80% of the 20%. That's 80% overall. So that means actually only 20% of women, excuse me, are having a natural birth. Sorry, guys. And then about 30% of women are getting a C-section. And that is like Canada and US kind of average, right? But certain pockets, certain hospitals here and there go upwards of 80 to sometimes 90% C-section rates. So my mission here is to lower all of these numbers. They are all way too high. The fact that only 20% of women, 80% of women are not giving birth naturally. Only 20% of women are doing that. So that's why I'm here to teach you guys how to do that, how to tune into the process, how to make it work for you. Because the thing with all these interventions is that you're not sick, right? Most pregnant women are healthier than they've ever been in their lives. And so you don't need interventions in your birth unless there's a problem in your birth. In that case, yes, bring on the interventions. Thank God we have these interventions. That's when they're, indicated and appreciated and helpful and actually, making a positive difference for the birth. But you don't need these interventions just because you're giving birth, just because you're pregnant, just because you're a healthy, low-risk woman who's having a baby, right? They're not necessary in every birth. And so it's really, up to you to be able to hopefully avoid these interventions by doing the preparation that we're talking about here. All right, assumption number 2 is that you are going to suffer through your labor, that you're going to be a victim of your labor, that you're going to suffer through your contractions. And if you have felt this way in the past, type yes in the chat. If you've thought this thought, if it has crossed your mind, yes. Becca says yes. Hafsa raised her hand. Kim raised her hand. Nicole says yes with a million S's. Cabby says yes. Destiny, yes. Mandy, yes. Look at everyone raising their hands. Kaylee Perry, Camilla, Eliza. Okay, so basically you have almost all had this thought. Hafsa says scared of the pain, right? So that's definitely a concern for pregnant women. And I hear you. It's definitely, especially if this is your first birth and you don't know what to expect, that's a thing, right? It's legit. But this is a very disempowering thought or mindset to take into your labor with you. We have got to change this thought pattern, you guys. Because if you want to have a positive birth experience, it does not follow that you can go into your birth feeling like you're going to be victimized and you're going to suffer and come out the other end of it having had a beautiful, magical, empowering birth experience, right? You have to go into it with a positive mindset in order to come out the other side with a positive mindset. So we have to do some mindset work here. Because if there's one thing I have learned in my life, in my births, in my business, in my marriage, in my parenting, like just in life, everything, mindset is absolutely everything. Every single situation and scenario can be viewed in a positive way or in a negative way, and it's up to you, right? And you want your birth to be viewed in a positive way. This is that tattoo on your soul. This is that lifelong connection you're going to share with your baby. This is that really, really deeply impacting experience that you're going to remember and relive and retell over and over and over again. So you want to have a positive association with it. And the best way to do that is going into it with the birth goddess magic mindset. Now, this is a positive mindset hack that I've been teaching since 2010. And women just really seem to gravitate to it. They really seem to like it and appreciate it and be able to apply it. Because no matter why you want to give birth naturally, and there's a number of reasons that women will choose this path, but no matter why you want to give birth naturally, it's important to remember that you're doing it voluntarily, right? This is your conscious birth choice that you're making. No one is forcing you to give birth naturally. In fact, it's often the exact opposite. You often have to defend your choice to give birth naturally, right? So it doesn't make sense if you say, okay, this is my conscious birth choice. This is my voluntary decision to do this. It doesn't follow then to say that you're victimized and suffering from it, right? When you're choosing this. So now that you kind of have flipped that aspect and you've kind of changed your mindset around that, now you have all the control. Now you can actually turn around and welcome your contractions with love and gratitude. Now, I completely appreciate that this is a total, mindset shift from the societal birth bias, right? From the typical conversation that we have around labor and birth. But you have the ability, you have the power to reframe your contractions. And the more you do this, the more you do this love and gratitude mindset, it gives you the ability to get better and better and better at it. So this is something you can practice in your day-to-day life now, right? Day in, day out. If you're in a situation or a scenario that you're not in love with, that you are, either sitting in traffic or you're in line or you're having a disagreement with someone, if you're able to practice, okay, how can I find love and gratitude here? How can I find a bright side? How can I find a positive aspect? Where's the lesson? Where's the silver lining? Right? Just always kind of veering to the more positive aspect of whatever you're coming up against will help you so much when you're in labor, when you're mid-contraction, to still find the positive aspect of that and welcome that in with love and gratitude, right? Becca says, the pain is the only thing I've really been anxious about. I'm excited about everything else. Yes. Well, it's the only thing you ever hear about, right? When people talk about labor and birth, the pain is the only thing that they talk about. So don't worry, we're going to talk a lot more about pain, but just start to kind of think about it in this way. And we're going to talk more about this love and gratitude stuff. So, reframing your contractions and welcoming them with love and gratitude, it sounds good. It's a little tricky to actually understand until you're in labor, right? Until you're mid-contraction. Then you'll be like, oh, I see what she's talking about. But so I want to give you this story about Andrea's birth, so that you can kind of, understand it, to kind of apply it a little bit. So this is Andrea. When I first spoke to her on the phone, and this was years ago, she was probably about 4 minutes pregnant. Like, I'm not joking. I think she literally had just peed on the stick and called me up and was like, oh my God, I am pregnant. I need a naturopath. I need a labor doula because I'm pregnant and I'm terrified. Now, she wanted to be pregnant. She was trying to get pregnant, but she was pregnant and now she needed to go through labor. And so that's what was terrifying to her, because she had felt throughout her whole entire life that she had this low pain tolerance. And she was already a little bit of an anxious person, and this just kind of sent her through the roof. And she was a little bit anxious, but a very healthy person. She ate incredibly well and drank her water and took her supplements and exercised and slept well. Like, she took impeccable care of herself. And so it makes sense that she would want to also give birth without any unnecessary medications and interventions. And so, we had to do a lot of chatting about this fear and this low pain tolerance throughout her pregnancy, and remind her, do with some mindset coaching that this is her choice. No one's forcing her to do this naturally. She can always get the epidural if she wants to, but she doesn't want to. So we have to reframe these sensations. And so I thought that maybe I was getting through to her, but she still seemed, a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious. And so fast forward to when she's actually in labor, and her husband called me and said, okay, we're in the hospital, come over and meet us. And I assumed that I would walk through the door, drop my bags, and like run and catch her. Like I thought that she was going to be having such a hard time, that she was going to really, really need me. And so I walked in the door, and instead I had to catch myself on the door frame, like from falling over, because I could not believe what I was seeing. Like she went from this tightly wound little anxious ball of nerves before she was in labor to this loose, flowing, strong, beautiful, radiant birth goddess in labor. It was the most magical transformation I've ever seen. Like she owned it. She dominated this labor. And she was very, very close knit with her family. They were all like waiting outside the waiting room. And as soon as the baby was born, they all came in and hugging and kissing and passing the baby around and taking pictures. And somebody took this picture. And I'm so happy they did, because now I can remember this moment. I can share it with you guys. But right before they took it, I looked at her and was like, Andrea, I am so proud of you. Like, I'm so happy for you. That was so impressive. Like, I can't believe what I just saw. She basically had a perfect birth. She had like a 6-hour labor, 8-pound baby, not a tear, not a stitch, not an intervention. She did everything herself. I basically supported her husband more than I supported her. And I was just like, I can't believe what I just saw. Like, you absolutely crushed that. And she looked at me and goes, you know what? I was happy to do it. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly the energy that you took to every single contraction. She was happy to do it. She was honored to do it. She was grateful to do it. She loved getting the chance to do it, the opportunity. And it just so clearly reflected in how her birth turned out, how efficiently she was able to labor. Like, this picture was taken, I don't know, 15 minutes or so after she gave birth. And look at how happy and proud and excited and radiant she looks. And I think that that really speaks to her mindset and how positive her birth experience was at the end of the day. So mindset really cannot be underestimated, guys. Your mindset is going to make or break you in your labor. And the good news is, with your mindset, you have a ton of control over how your contractions feel. It's not an objective thing. Pain is not an objective thing. You can actually change your perception of the pain using your mind. It's not that some women have easy contractions and some women have difficult contractions. No, some women have coping techniques, other women do not, right? So that's where you want to be. You want to be one of the women who have the coping techniques to help take the edge off the pain, not be totally overwhelmed and freaking out by them, but instead be almost energized and empowered by them, because you can manage them so well. So the 3 tips I have for labor training for your mind are to run the marathon, ride the wave, and resist nothing. So to run the marathon, I love this picture. This woman is in beast mode. Nothing is getting in her way. And that's kind of how you have to be. So I often liken labor to a marathon, because for both of these activities that you're signing up for a long, difficult physical endurance event that is going to last for hours, right? That's not a surprise. Everybody knows that. And so for an event like this, you need to get into a certain mentality. You have to get into that really super focused marathon mentality, that long game mentality. And in order to stay focused, you cannot be distracted by the numbers. Okay, so there's 2 different reasons for that. First reason is that labor is not linear. So, sorry, by the numbers, I mean how many centimeters dilated you are, or how many hours you've been in labor. Okay, so the first reason you can't worry about those numbers is because labor is not linear. So what I mean by that is, if you're in labor for 12 hours and you get checked and you're 4 centimeters dilated, it's not necessarily going to take you another 12 hours to get another 4 centimeters of dilation. It's not linear like that, especially once you get to 4 centimeters. That's once you're after 4 centimeters, then you're into active labor. Then things pick up and move a lot quicker than from 0 to 4 centimeters. And think of, in terms of what your body is capable of doing, how quickly your body's capable of delivering. Think of my 4-hour power birthers, right? Or myself for my last birth, how quickly things were able to change and progress. So labor is not linear. You cannot worry about how many hours or how many centimeters. So when you get checked and you hear your 4 centimeters, do not get stressed and anxious and pissed and defeated and disappointed and all these emotions, okay? You need to completely ignore those numbers, because all those emotions that crop up are actually creating stress hormones in your body. And those stress hormones are dampening and slowing, sometimes even stopping your labor hormone production. And this is one of the reasons that I never progressed past 5 centimeters with my first baby, because I went from my beautiful, dark, intimate, wonderful home labor to the hospital in an ambulance, right? So like, yes, that's going to cause stress hormones. That's going to impact how my labor is able to progress. So these stress hormones, let me give you a little bit of like an evolutionary understanding of why this happens. So imagine a cave woman back in the day. She's 40 weeks pregnant. She's going into labor in her cave. And all of a sudden, a saber-toothed tiger jumps into her cave and is ready to eat her for lunch. Well, her body is going to spew out a whole bunch of stress hormones, right? Cortisol, adrenaline, fight or flight hormones. And her body is wise enough to understand that that means there is danger out here. And danger out here means this is not the best time, like thinking evolution of or continuation of the species. This is not the best time to push out a super vulnerable baby. Mom and baby are going to get eaten, and then continuation of the species doesn't happen there, right? So instead, the body interprets that fight or flight hormone, those fight or flight hormones, to say, you know what? We're going to actually focus on this right now. We're going to put this labor on hold. We're going to redirect all our resources to the fight or flight, get mom the heck out of here to find a safe place where she can then go into labor again. So that's all well and good. But you're like, we don't have saber-toothed tigers jumping into our caves anymore. But the thing is, your body doesn't know the difference between a 4 centimeter report and a saber-toothed tiger if it's producing the exact same hormones in your body. Okay? So now that you know that, when you hear your 4 centimeters dilated and you think you should be further along, don't let that get you down. Don't let that stress you out. People in the Love Your Labor program have said that they've gone from 4 centimeters to 7 centimeters in one contraction. Okay? It depends on how prepared your body is, which we're going to talk about in a second, and how mentally able you are to kind of stay calm, stay focused, keep those stress hormones at bay, and just get right back to that marathon mentality. Just get your head down, right back to business, eye on that prize, one contraction at a time, and just do the work like a marathon runner would, right? Just one foot in front of the other, boom, boom, boom. Just stay super focused in the zone and you will get there. All right, the next tip I have for you is to ride the wave. I love this tip, okay? So we all know what a bell curve is, right? It starts at the bottom, it goes up and around and back down. Well, that is exactly the pattern that a contraction takes, which is really good to know, right? It starts at the bottom and it's like a wave. You can literally feel it coming before it gets here. So you're like, okay, one's coming. You tell your partner, start the timer. Okay, contraction is here. Yeah, okay, it's here. Oh yeah, it's getting a little harder. Okay, it's getting a little stronger and you're on the way up, okay? Yeah, it's getting, oh yeah, it's getting a little stronger. Oh, okay, I gotta stand up and, oh, okay, it's getting harder. Oh, you know, it's getting really strong. Oh, now it's getting really strong. You're going up and around the peak of the bell curve, okay? Up and around the peak of the wave. Now, the peak of the wave is the hardest part by a mile, right? This is absolutely where you need to dig the deepest, you need to work the hardest, you need to focus the strongest, you need to use all of your resources, your support person, every coping mechanism you've got, right? For sure. But just like a wave, that tension builds, 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 and then it breaks. Oh, and then all of a sudden you're still way up here. Oh, it's still really painful. Oh, but you can tell it's like getting a little bit easier. Oh, every second you're getting a little bit lower. Oh, okay, it's easing up. It's easing up. Okay, it's on the way down. Oh, oh, okay, it's just getting a little bit. Okay, it's almost there. It's almost gone. Oh, oh. Okay, it's gone. And then you're back down to the bottom. And you get a couple minutes of a break to have a sip of water and regroup and, you know, talk to your partner about what worked for that last one and get your head around the next one. So really good to know that, right? That this is the pattern that a contraction takes. And so if you think of it that way and you kind of have, you know, the wave, you have the incline, then the peak, and then the decline, then you know that each contraction essentially has 3 chunks or 3 phases. And if each contraction is about a minute long, then each of those chunks is only 20 seconds long. And I don't care what it is, if you set your mind to it, you can absolutely do it for 20 seconds. I know that for sure, for sure. So this is a really good tip for you to mentally get your mind around contractions, okay? So yes, when you're in labor, it's good for you to understand where you are in the contraction. Like, no, I know I'm still on the incline. I'm still on the incline. It's still totally manageable. Okay, here's the peak. Now you can, you know, really dig in and really focus. But then when you're on the way down, you can, okay, no, I know I'm on the way down. I'm on the way down. It's getting easier and easier and easier. So that's good. But even as you're like anticipating your labor, just understanding that labor is not like a 30-hour constant brick of pain. It's not like that. There's, you know, contractions and then breaks. And even within the contraction, there's this really nice ebb and flow that you can totally get your mind around, that you can totally make it work for you. So that's a really, really good tip, both before you're in labor and when you're actually experiencing a contraction. Then the third tip I have for you for the mental mind training stuff is to resist nothing. And this is the best tip I could give you by far. But unfortunately, it's also the most difficult to actually implement when you're mid-contraction, because the normal, typical response when we're experiencing a really overwhelming, difficult sensation, like a contraction, a really difficult contraction, is to resist it or avoid it or tense up or escape from it. And that's a good reaction when we're dealing with a saber-toothed tiger, but not a good reaction at all when we're dealing with a contraction, because that contraction has a job that you want it to do. You want to have a smooth and efficient birth. You want that contraction to come in and contract your uterus and help to dilate your cervix. You want each contraction to be as efficient as it can possibly be. And so you need to resist nothing. You need to get out of the way and go rag doll loose, head to toe, as loose and relaxed as you can possibly be. So helps sometimes to think about these flowers, right? If you're the flower and the wind is the contraction, when the wind blows, the flowers are not resisting and pushing against the wind and trying to fight the wind or escape the wind. No, they're surrendering to the wind. They're letting the wind move them. And that's exactly what you have to do too. You have to relax into the contraction. Let it come, let it do its work, welcome it in with love and gratitude, because you are grateful for that contraction. You're grateful to finally be in labor. You're grateful for the work that that contraction is doing to help dilate your cervix and bring your baby down. It's all good things. So reframe it that way. Don't resist it. Let it come in, let it do its work, get out of the way. Okay? Alrighty. Assumption number 3, you guys, is that your body already knows what it's doing and you don't need to do any additional preparation, right? I don't have to do anything. I'm going into labor, but there's nothing that I need to do, right? Well, that's a bit tricky, because yes, your body absolutely knows what it's doing. This is a natural, normal, physiological process. But you absolutely still do need to do labor preparation. 100% you do. And the reason for that is because your birth is on the clock. So your birth is on the clock in 2 ways. As you approach your due date, doctors are breathing down your neck. When are we inducing? When are we doing stretch and sweeps? When are we getting this thing moving? When are we scheduling the C-section, right? They are like TikTok moving this thing along. Then once you're in labor, it's like, okay, clock has started, especially if your water is broken, you only get X number of hours. And if you're still in this phase after X number of hours, then they're suggesting this intervention, blah, blah, blah. So everything is looking at the time and looking at the clock and looking at the calendar. And so, you know, I'm not here to teach your body how to give birth. Of course, your body knows how to do that. But what I am here to do is help you to teach your body or help teach you how to support your body and streamline and focus your laboring energy so that you have a smooth and efficient birth, so that you go into labor on or around your due date, so that your birth is smooth and efficient as much as possible, so that there's not even an opportunity for them to offer you interventions because everything's just ticking along so smoothly and efficiently and easily. Okay. So we have to do a little bit of training for the body as well, because it breaks my heart to see women end up in that labor funnel because they've hit one of these physical roadblocks. It's one thing to mentally not be able to cope with the pain, but sometimes the body hits one of these roadblocks, right? But the good news is they're all relatively preventable if you're able to do a little bit of labor prep before you go into labor. So what we have to do here is soften the cervix, strengthen the uterus, and situate the baby. So the first step is to prepare the cervix, and we're going to do a little anatomy and physiology recap so everyone knows what the cervix is and what it does. So if you think of your uterus as a balloon, a blown up balloon, then the cervix is the little tied off part at the bottom. So usually the cervix is what separates the uterus from the vagina. So if you think of that cervix as a lifesaver, you know when you pop a lifesaver in your mouth that it starts out pretty thick, pretty hard with a small hole in the middle. Well, that's exactly how the cervix is too. It starts out pretty thick or long. It's about 2 inches long. Pretty hard. It's about the consistency of the tip of your nose in a pregnant woman. And it has a small hole in the middle, although that usually is closed throughout the majority of your pregnancy. So as you're sucking on that lifesaver, you suddenly notice like partway through, like, oh, all of a sudden it's a little bit thinner and the hole in the middle is a little bit wider. Well, the exact same thing is true for your cervix. As you're going through labor, your cervix is thinning or shortening. So it's going from 2 inches to 1 inch to eventually completely paper thin, almost gone. And that's called effacement. And the hole in the middle is getting wider as well. And eventually it goes from completely closed to all the way open, which is 10 centimeters dilated. So the work of labor is to thin and open that cervix so that eventually the uterus is directly open to the vagina. That is how baby is pushed out through, which is super cool, right? But you need that cervix to be soft and malleable so it can make, or ripe as they call it, so it can make those changes, those effacement and dilation changes smoothly and efficiently, and it doesn't stall or stop anywhere. It doesn't, take forever and ever and ever to get to full dilation. So the reason you want to have a soft, malleable cervix is so that you don't get stuck in that slow or no dilation or long early labor step because of the cervix. Now there's a few reasons that this can be a thing, the slow or no dilation and the long early labor, but the cervix is definitely one of them. So you want to remove that as one of the problems that, could end you up in the labor funnel. You want to make sure the cervix is ready to dilate. The second step is to prepare the uterus. So another quick anatomy and physiology recap. This is the uterus that your baby's growing inside of. And the walls of the uterus are made of thick, smooth muscle that contract in a rhythmic fashion. And so that's contractions, right? And so we talk about here in the labor training for your body, the 3 things that we have to do to prepare your body, right? The cervix, the uterus, and the position of the baby. Well, I want to walk you through a contraction step by step so you can see how and why. These are the three things that we're looking at. You can see how they all play off each other and why they're also important. So a contraction starts down here by the cervix, down by the pink arrow, and it feels like a menstrual cramp, okay? Versus a Braxton Hicks, which just feels like your whole entire belly gets hard. This feels like a menstrual cramp. It's low, it's achy, it's uncomfortable, okay? So then it starts down here and it kind of rolls up, up, up and around the belly. So this is as you're on the incline, right? You're going up, 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 and then at the peak of the contraction, the uterus muscle gathers, it piles up here towards the top, and it pushes baby down. It squeezes baby down. Now, as long as baby's in this position, which is called the OA position, where baby's back is facing outward, facing your front, then the smallest, hardest part of the baby's head, which is called the occiput, is directly, firmly applied to the cervix, right? That's what we want. We want a nice, firm, direct pressure here to the cervix. Now, as long as the cervix is soft and malleable, which we were just talking about, and as long as the uterus is giving good, strong, regular, effective contractions that are coming, in regular intervals, then you can see how this whole entire process just goes off without a hitch, super smoothly and efficiently, right? Because this nice firm pressure helps that cervix to dilate, and then baby can be pushed out through. So you really want to make sure that the uterus is producing good, strong, regular, effective contractions, because you don't want the slow or no dilation and the long early labor thing to be happening because of the uterus. So the uterus in early labor can be giving you contractions that are like 10 minutes apart, 20 minutes apart, 5 minutes apart, 8 minutes apart, 10 minutes apart, 3 minutes apart, 20 minutes apart. Like, there is no regularity. There's no consistency. They're like 45 minutes, 45 seconds or 30 seconds long. They're like really easy to manage. You can totally talk through them. That is early labor. And that is where the uterus is getting organized. It's kind of getting its feet under it, but you don't want that to be lasting too long, because that can be really, really tiring and draining. You want to move through that phase as quickly as possible and get into active labor, which is after 4 centimeters dilated, where contractions are coming, 4 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, like super regular, super consistent, 1 minute long, nice, good, strong, regular contractions. That is what is going to make the difference. And one of the best things I know of to help tone that uterus, get it really, really good and ready for labor, is acupressure. And this is what I used to do with all of my my patients in clinic. They would all get acupuncture in clinic. They would all go home with acupressure homework to do at home. And this is what sets the Love Your Labor Love Your Labor program apart from anything else on the market. And this is what makes it so incredibly effective, is adding in this acupressure component. And this, I can clearly tell you, was a huge part of not only my VBAC, but specifically my successful home birth. Acupressure was a big, big piece of that puzzle. And one of the reasons I love it so much is that it's so versatile. There are 9 points in the Love Your Labor program, and they do all of these things. They tone your uterus. They prepare your uterus for labor. They soften your cervix and prepare that for labor as well, to dilate really nice and easily. They can induce your labor naturally, easily, energetically. They boost your contractions. So when you are having those weird, wonky, irregular contractions, that can help pull you through and get your contractions to be more regular. They can position your baby into that OA position that's the most desirable position. And this is what I would have done if I had known my baby was breech. I would have done acupressure. They also are amazing at reducing your pain in labor and helping your cervix to dilate more swiftly in labor as well, and so much more. There's actually acupressure points involved in every single module of the Love Your Labor program, because it's just that effective. All right, and then step 3 of the physical body training is to position the baby in the pelvis. So another anatomy and physiology recap. This is the female pelvis. It's wider on women than it is on men, because we deliver babies through here, right? And you can see here this pelvic opening, not huge, right? Considering we have to push a human baby out through there, this is not a massive opening. But don't let that discourage you, because Mother Nature has a couple of really cool ways to help make sure baby can fit out through that pelvic opening, and get out through that birth canal as smoothly and efficiently as possible. So the first way is that the body produces a hormone called relaxin throughout your entire pregnancy. And the relaxin is directed at cartilage and ligaments throughout your whole body, really to just relax, essentially, to like give and stretch a little bit to accommodate the growing belly, the growing baby, all the changes that need to happen in labor or in pregnancy. But really, that relaxin is directed at your pelvis, right? Specifically here at the pubic symphysis, or where the pubic bone attaches, as well as where the hip bones attach to the sacrum. This is why women get pubic bone pain and low back pain in labor. And the reason that the relaxin is specifically directed at the pelvis is because Mother Nature knows that the baby needs to get out through that pelvis in order to have a successful delivery, right? And that is much more likely to happen if the pelvis is not super rigid, right? If it's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more give, a little more loosey-goosey, then baby can inch and scooch and wiggle its way out through the pelvic opening here. Then the second way that Mother Nature's devised to get baby out is that babies' skull bones are not fused, right? So we've all seen babies born with a little bit of a cone head, and that is because their skull bones literally shifted and molded on top of one another to fit out through this pelvic opening, which is pretty cool, right? So between those two things, the vast majority of babies should be able to fit out through the pelvic opening. Now, the best position for a baby to be in to have the smoothest, most efficient exit from the pelvis is this. Once again, the OA position, occiput anterior. Now, sometimes if baby's in this position but backwards, so baby's back is facing your back, that's called OP, occiput posterior, or sunny side up. That, or any other position other than OA, basically, is going to result in back labor. And back labor is, I've had it, well, essentially 3 times now. I had a breech baby, I had an OP baby, and then Vance was in this kind of funny, like transverse, almost like facing my side position. And so I've had back labor for all of my labors. And it's not something I would wish on my worst enemy, because not only does it increase the risk of intervention because it's like double the pain, right? It's pain in the back and pain in the front. But it also increases the risk of intervention because baby's not properly positioned in the pelvis, right? So you might need a little bit of help getting out through the pelvis, hopefully just vacuum forceps or episiotomy. But sometimes, like in my case, even a C-section is necessary. And so you want to really make sure that the baby's in the proper position. This is a big deal. This is a big determining factor. I want to say maybe even the biggest, because it doesn't matter how strong your uterus is or how soft your cervix is. If the baby's not in the proper position in the pelvis, they just can't get out, right? So it's really, really critical that you get baby into an optimal position, because it could cause you to go overdue if baby's not in the proper position. If they're just not engaging in the pelvis, then there's just no signal to go into labor. If it could be causing slow or no dilation or long early labor, just because, again, baby's not applied to the cervix. It's not making the changes that you need to make. And baby being in the wrong position is in and of itself a risk factor for the labor funnel, right? So again, really, really probably one of the most important pieces of this puzzle is the position of the baby. And again, this was my big downfall for my first birth, because the baby was breech and also almost 10 pounds. And so just not coming out that way. So remember, guys, at the beginning of the webinar, we were talking about natural labor preparation, and we were talking about the 2 big roadblocks that we wanted to talk about on the webinar tonight. And they were fear, right? But first of all, fear, hopefully you're feeling a little bit better in the fear department now, right? Because we've trained the mind. We've given you the birth goddess magic mindset. We've also done some labor training for the mind, right? To run the marathon, ride the wave, and resist nothing. So hopefully the fear is subdued a little bit. And then the second part was the labor funnel, which is a huge obstacle, a huge problem for women who are trying to have a natural birth, especially in hospital. And so you can see now how important it is to train the body, important it is to soften the cervix, strengthen the uterus, and situate the baby in the pelvis. And those three things, I mean, they could be a webinar or three, right, on their own. There's so much more information there. And that is why I created the Love Your Labor program, because there is so much more to tell you than what I was able to share on this webinar. And that's why I created this program, because it literally breaks my heart to see women like myself, right, who were robbed of their natural birth experiences because they weren't prepared in one area or another. And so that's the basis of this whole method. And remember, when I was in clinic, I was seeing patients and their partners, and I was able to walk through this 4-step natural labor preparation system with them. Now, the 4 steps were exactly what the 4 modules are in the Love Your Labor program. So the first step was being mentally and physically prepared for your best labor experience. This is what we talked about tonight on the webinar, right? Then the second step was having your partner be specifically trained on how to really support you in labor through each of the different phases of labor. And this is important, that it's actually your partner. And I'll tell you why in one second. The third step was understanding some really quick breastfeeding tips before the baby arrives, just to help, ease into that postpartum, ease into the breastfeeding relationship, and also save your nipples, which is very, very important. And then step 4 was feeling really empowered, because you can avoid going overdue, because you have natural labor induction tools that you can be doing at home by yourself with your partner at any time you choose, right? So very, very empowering stuff. And when I was in clinic with these couples, they were right across the desk from me, right? So we were going through these things, and we were able to kind of talk things out and hash things out and really individualize this information for them. But then when I transferred it over to an online program, I was obviously not able to sit down with these couples and go through it like that. So I had to lay a little bit of groundwork, right, to begin, to make sure everyone was on the same page. So we start the groundwork with the childbirth education video. And this is just really, really basic prenatal class kind of education information. So this is for, people who haven't taken a prenatal class, or even if you have, anatomy, physiology, basic stages of labor, things like that. Really, really kind of just to get everyone up to speed. Then the second piece of groundwork is the prenatal yoga and meditation bonus. Now, this piece of groundwork is, of course, it's a 15-minute prenatal yoga sequence that you can be doing at home. It's a meditation, like mantras and hypnobirthing kind of style audio that you can listen to over and over and over again. But I call this the how to breathe groundwork, because this teaches you how to breathe in labor on top of everything else. And you might be like, hey, Corinne, I breathe all day, every day. And you totally do, but it's different in labor. You have to have a different kind of breath in labor. And the more you can practice that beforehand, the much easier it will be for you to tap into it when you're actually in labor. Your breath is going to be your number one coping tool in labor. So really, really important that you get that part right. Then the third piece of groundwork is the pain training bundle. And this is so important because, we've already established that the pain is a big concern for a lot of you, right? And I can't teach you any other part of the program before we do away with the fear of the pain, because otherwise the pain will just always be front and center and you won't actually absorb the rest of the information. So part 1 of the pain training bundle is the pain training workshop. And this is where I just teach you about the pain. I teach you about anatomy, physiology, where it's happening, why it's happening, how it actually benefits your natural birth, which nobody talks about, and how to manage it. I teach you how to manage it actually with this amazing pain training exercise that I do right on the video. You can do it right along with me. It takes 2 minutes. And it literally shows you in 2 minutes how to take an experience from painful to painless without changing anything except your mindset. It's crazy and it works. And I can tell you firsthand, I used it in all 3 of my labors. It for sure works. I know it sounds too good to be true. And then part 2 of the pain training bundle is the natural pain relief resource guide. This is where I give you essential oils and homeopathics to help minimize the pain and help you get to the end of your labor naturally, because 99% of the work of labor is contractions. So if you want to avoid the epidural, you need to have some natural tools in your toolbox as you go into your birth. And that's what this is here for you. All right. So then once we've covered the groundwork, now we can move into module 1, which is the birth boot camp or the labor preparation module. So this is where we kind of expand on what we talked about here on the webinar tonight. This is where we give you the protocol to, the supplement protocol to soften the cervix, the herbal protocol to strengthen the uterus, then the tips and ergonomics and exercises and whatnot to properly position the baby in the pelvis. And we've talked about how very, very important that is. Then module 2 is the daddy doula or the partner training module. And this is definitely one of my favorites. I don't want to say my favorite, but it's one of my absolute favorites because proper ongoing labor support is one of the biggest determining factors. Research has shown this time and time again for how successful a woman will be in laboring naturally. And Mother Nature is freaking brilliant and has set it up so that your partner is actually the best possible labor support person for you because of the hormone oxytocin. So we've talked about oxytocin already as the labor hormone, which it is, but it's also the love hormone and the bonding hormone and the cuddle hormone and the orgasm hormone. So your body is very, very used to producing oxytocin when your partner is right there with you, next to you, touching you, talking to you, whispering to you, all of those things. So if you can maximize on that, use your partner to boost your oxytocin in labor, not only is that going to boost your contractions, pull you through early labor into active labor much quicker, but it's also going to make sure you guys have a really beautiful, bonding, loving labor experience together. And that is absolutely priceless. And that is why I created the Labor Partner Handbook, because your partner is such a critical player in this whole thing. And, labor is a 2-person job for sure. It's not just up to you to cope with the pain of contractions. Your partner has a very big role to play. And so that's why I created this handbook. So there's nothing to memorize. There's nothing to forget. Everything is right there at their fingertips so that they can feel empowered and informed and helpful and useful, but also so that you can be properly supported and have all these amazing benefits of the ongoing support. And then module 3 is the breastfeeding basics or the breastfeeding support module. And this is really so important because you start breastfeeding 1 hour after your baby arrives, right? So you've just gone through labor, you've just pushed out a baby, baby's here. It's like this whole whirlwind, you're bonding, you're doing all the things. And then they're like, okay, let's latch your baby on. And if you don't have any idea how to do that, you are really setting yourself up for potential nipple damage, for a poor milk supply. You really want to have a couple of tips and tricks to get baby latched on properly as soon as possible, just to maximize the likelihood that you'll have a successful breastfeeding relationship, good milk supply, and, save your nipples from unnecessary, unwanted damage. And then we move on to module 4, which is the labor accelerator. And this is my other favorite. I don't want to pick favorites, but this one is so important because this is where we get to cash in on all that labor preparation we've been doing since module 1 and switch from labor preparation mode into labor induction mode. So if you think of your body as like a car, we go from idling and warming and revving that engine, changing the gears, hitting the gas, and going. So that's the labor accelerator. And this allows you to avoid going overdue, to have a say in when you go into labor, because you have these DIY, gentle, natural, at-home labor induction techniques that really, truly work. And I'm living proof that they absolutely work. I had all 3 of my babies before my due date. And not only do they work to induce your labor, but when you do go into labor, if you're having that wonky kind of early labor sporadic contraction thing, you can do this exact same techniques to boost your labor as well. And if you can use these natural induction techniques to induce your labor and boost your labor, you can essentially prevent the use of Pitocin in your birth at all. And this just kind of brings us full circle, right? Back to the top of the webinar now. We talk about the labor funnel and how Pitocin is the first step into it. So if you can avoid Pitocin, you can probably avoid the whole entire labor funnel, which is the ultimate empowerment. That's what every woman who wants to give birth naturally wants, right? It's to avoid the labor funnel. So really, really important stuff here. So regular price on my website, you guys, if you were to visit loveyourlabor.com, you'd see that the regular price of the program is $3.99. But because you guys have been here hanging out with me for the last, hour and a half or more, I want to give you a really sweet deal. So if you decide to purchase the program anytime before Sunday night at midnight, you can get access to this amazing $197 webinar only offer. So regular price, the program's $3.99, but if you buy off this webinar before Sunday night, $197 for everything. So that is the 3 pieces of groundwork, the 4 pieces of core content, the 4 modules, plus each of these modules comes with a really important bonus. So we have the natural birth plan, which is a worksheet and a video that you can help create your own birth plan from that. We have the labor partner handbook, which I've already talked about, the milk supply guide, which helps you to bring your milk in once your baby arrives, and then the 3rd trimester meal plan, which is really amazing for gestational diabetes or, just really making sure that you have a healthy, normal sized baby instead of an oversized baby, which is harder to fit out through the pelvis. Now, 3 really important things about that $197 offer is that there's a 15-day money-back guarantee. So once you purchase, you have 15 days to go through the content of the program and let me know if you are unsatisfied. But knock on wood, I've actually never had someone ask for a refund because they were not happy with the content of the program, which says a lot. Also, that $197 is in Canadian dollars, so that's good for my Canadian friends who don't have to pay the exchange, and for my American friends who essentially get to pay the American rate, which is much cheaper than the Canadian dollar. And then also the program is actually locked behind a membership site. So once you purchase the program, you get an email saying go here and create your username and password. And once you do that, then you get access to the membership area. This is the whole back end of the content of the program where you get access to all the content right away. Now, the entire program is digital. There is no, there's nothing that I'm sending to your house or anything like that. Everything is videos and ebooks, which you can download, you can print to your own computer. And everything, the whole entire program is right here along the left-hand side. So we have the groundwork, each of the modules, we have a whole section of surprise bonuses, and all my video blogs as well. And at the beginning of the webinar, I talked about how I've updated the program in this last pregnancy, and all of the masterclass information is also found here under each module. Now, the beautiful thing about an online program versus an in-person prenatal class is that the content is instantly accessible right now through the membership site. So you can literally right now purchase the program and get access to the content and start consuming it right away. You can watch it from the comfort of your own home, from your phone, from public transportation, wherever you are, you can watch this stuff if you have Wi-Fi. You can watch it at your own pace, which means you can binge on it tomorrow, or you can take it week by week by week, and you can pause it, watch it, rewind, rewatch it as many times as you like, because you have lifetime access to the program. There's another program on the market that is somewhat comparable to this program, although I think Love Your Labor is a much more robust, much more well-rounded program. But the other program is more expensive and only gives you access for 1 year. But the beautiful thing about Love Your Labor, the lifetime access, means you can go through it as many times as you want, and you can go through it for future babies, which I have people in the group doing right now, which is super cool. So that's a big plus, a big bonus to having the digital content. And on top of all of the content in the program, all the bonuses, all the masterclass information, there's also an exclusive Facebook group. So this is only for moms who have purchased the Love Your Labor program. And we talked at the beginning of the webinar about, sometimes it's hard to find people who understand why you want to have a natural birth and who support you in that. Well, if that's you, this is your tribe. This is your group of women who will support you and love you and encourage you through your natural birth preparation. And as well, I am in the group. So if you have any questions for me, if you have any questions about the program, I am in that group every single day, chatting with these people and, answering their questions, asking questions, and just in there engaging and just loving all the labor talk and the birth stories and all the support and love and encouragement that goes into it. So once again, you guys, here is the webinar offer. So regular price $3.99. If you purchase before Sunday night, it is $197 Canadian dollars for the 3 pieces of groundwork, the 4 pieces of core content, each of those bonuses, plus the Facebook community and the 15-day money-back guarantee. So if this sounds like a good idea, if this sounds like a good fit, if this sounds like it inspires you and, aligns with your values and what you're hoping to achieve for your birth, I do hope that you say heck yes to the program, to your birth, to your baby, to this experience, to this tattoo on your soul that you will relive and retell and remember forever and ever and ever. Say heck yes. Invest in yourself. This is the opportunity to make your birth the best it can possibly be. So once again, you guys, here is the offer. If you have any questions, you can totally hit me up on Facebook, or you can email me. Just hit reply to any email that I have sent you in the past, and that will deliver it right into my inbox and we can chat that way. But I do hope that you decide to join me in the program and that I see you over in the Facebook group. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you on the flip side. Okay, bye, guys.